Welcome to the Darkstream, Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Wilson Bear is excited. He says, "Whoa, Darkstream Live. I'm told audio and video are good. Thank you, Sam." And we are rolling. So there's the big news of the day, obviously, was the surprise attack by 200 to 300 Hamas kamikazes, frankly it looks like, and the unprecedented success they had in capturing a number, I think something like 14 Israeli settlements temporarily, kidnapping a number of civilians and soldiers, and killing at least 40 people, although I heard numbers as high as 200 being possible. So now I don't know about you, but my first reaction to hearing the news was, what on earth do the Hamas strategists think they're going to accomplish here? You know, what is the goal? And of course, you know, the normal person will answer, well, terrorism. But terrorism is a method. Terrorism is an asymmetric form of warfare that is used to attempt to achieve something. What are the demands here? What are the objectives? Now, you know, it's entirely possible, and I've talked to a couple of very smart people in Israel who are, you know, in the middle of this, more or less. None of them write where the activity is taking place, but you know, Israel's a small country, and so you're never very far from anything, no matter where in the country it is. And you know, everybody seems to be a bit confused. You know, everybody immediately, of course, looked to the north. Everyone immediately was wondering, okay, is this some sort of feint or some sort of attempt to distract the IDF, while the much more serious threat of Hezbollah does something from the north? Because remember, Hezbollah has proved that they at least have the ability to fight the Israeli Defense Forces on reasonably equal terms. You know, it's more equal than Russia versus Ukraine, anyhow. And you know, there's no question that the Israeli military remains the best in the region, but you know, the question is by how much. And you know, that 2008 experience in Lebanon pretty well convinced the Israelis that, you know, let's not fight Hezbollah unless we absolutely have to. So that was the first thing I thought. That was the first thing a number of, shall we say, individuals educated and astute in military history thought. And of course, everyone's looking to, you know, if Hezbollah is involved, that means that Iran is probably involved behind it. But the interesting thing was that Hezbollah gave about, you know, what in Arabic terms is about the most pedestrian, non-committal, vague sort of statement that could be imagined. I think, if I recall correctly, they actually said, we're monitoring the situation. you know, when someone's monitoring the situation, that's pretty, as Powers That Bear says, that's just short of saying, yeah, we're not interested. So think about that. One of the most implacable and dangerous enemies of the Israeli state isn't really that interested in what's going on, right? That's pretty fascinating. And then we hear that Hamas may have gotten the weapons from Ukraine. Well, Ukraine, if you recall, is run by members of the Jewish diaspora. And the Ukraine is a state that was established and is supported and funded by the US-based neocons. So suddenly we have to say, it's not a false flag. It's clearly not a false flag. I don't think anyone who has paid any attention to this at all genuinely thinks that the attackers were actually Israeli Defense Forces or U.S. soldiers or Ukrainian troops. So it's not a false flag, but there is reason to reason to think and to suspect that maybe this is something that Israel didn't want, the Israeli government, I should say, really didn't want too hard to prevent. It's being reported and it's being billed as a catastrophic failure by the intelligence services. But the Mossad and the other Israeli intelligence organizations are, by all accounts, excellent. And so, what are the chances that an attack of this magnitude could have taken place without anybody in the Israeli government having any idea? Gaza is not a big place, and it's very, very heavily there's surveillance, there's probably a fair amount of infiltration. It seems very unlikely that Hamas could have amassed all of the rockets, organized all of the troops and the plans, because if you're talking about an incursion of up to 300 people, you're probably talking about a support level of several thousand. Now, I'm not one of those people who will say it can't be a secret because a lot of people can't keep a secret. Well, they did a pretty good job with the Manhattan Project. They've done a pretty good job with NASA, etc., etc. Yeah. Karen took the kid, says, if the Mossad knew 9/11 was coming, it would be a surprise that they didn't see this coming. That's true. And so if you look at all this, you have to say, well, what would be the point? It's always important to ask yourself that. Now, motivations do not prove what happened, but motivations do help you understand why things that happened. Excuse me. And so we know that the Netanyahu government has been itching to crack down on Gaza. We know this. And we also know that it is common in the Eastern way of war to always, and especially these days, and especially with the neocons, if you ask the neocons, they have never initiated any violence or conflict anywhere. They've always just successfully defended themselves as they invaded and overthrew governments and changed regimes and all that. It's always purely defensive, right? So anytime I see any any state, any organization affiliated with the neocons, I always assume that you have to at least be open to the probability that it's, the usual play the victim in order to justify your attack. And that's why I think that a comparison to Pearl Harbor is very apt. I think that those people saying, this is Israel's Pearl Harbor, are being more accurate than they know. Because there's no question that the U.S. intelligence agencies and the U.S. government knew about the Pearl Harbor attack by Japan. They provoked the Pearl Harbor attack by Japan. They were working very hard to try to get the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor. And if you haven't accepted that reality yet, I apologize, but you've got some reading to do. And so, Powers Up Bear asks, do you think Mohammed bin Salman's recent English interview is directly connected? I have no idea. None whatsoever. But we know that the Israeli right wing wants to ethnically cleanse the West Bank and Gaza. Not only that, they desperately need to do this before the U.S. completely loses its apparent position as the globe's sole superpower. Now, I have observed and I have pointed out that that is no longer the case, but a lot of people still believe that. There are still, in the eyes of most of the world, it's still up in the air as to whether the U.S. is going to lose its premier spot as the primary global superpower. I think it already has, but my perspective is seldom the one of the masses, as it were. I think people will come to realize that about this time, but I don't think they have yet. And so, we'll see what happens. Now, obviously, if Iran and Jordan and Hezbollah and whoever else happens to attack Israel, then you'd have to assume that either the Pearl Harbor analogy is correct, or that someone miscalculated very badly. Remember, plans fail. Even if this is a permitted situation, again, it's not a false flag. We need a better term to describe something that is not a false flag in terms of, the parties responsible are actually responsible, but it was not a surprise and it was not prevented by the targeted party. Which puts a very different spin on things. If a woman says, this man took off all my clothes and beat me and whipped me and paddled my backside, you start to say, hmm, hmm, are you in a relationship with this person? Well, yes, I am. Okay. And do you guys ever engage in any sort of consensual activities that maybe involve latex or leather? Oh yeah, yeah, we're really big into that scene. You know, the we're really big into discipline. You're like, okay, um, you are not a victim. You are a participant. A fait accompli. Yeah. Anyhow, we'll come up with a term at some point. But you know, and I'm not saying that this is the case. You know, don't go quoting me saying, you know, Vox says it's all you know, a plan by the Netanyahu government to permit going scorched earth in Gaza. It could be that. I think that there are a number of factors that are indicative of that, but we have to wait and see, you know, let events take their course and see what happens. And so, and of course, post COVID, I think we all understand, and everyone pretty much accepts the idea that a government might sacrifice a couple hundred of its own citizens in order to accomplish its strategic objectives is not exactly uh, an incredible uh, suggestion. You know, in light of all of these governments literally sentencing their own people to death by mRNA gene therapy, you know, literally killing their own people with genetic poisoning. Um, it's the idea that they would trade a few hundred civilians in order to accomplish control over the Holy Land, or frankly, uh, you know, to, I mean, let's face it, they would do it for a lot less than that. And I'm not talking about the Israeli government, I'm talking about damn near every government in the world. Because we saw damn near every government in the world happily, cheerfully, gleefully sacrifice hundreds of thousands of lives, not just to the vaccines, but also to the lockdowns. Now, I think the net effect of the lockdowns was actually probably positive because even if people were getting suicidally depressed um, and doing themselves in and stuff, the fact that they weren't driving on the roads and going out drinking probably net saved more lives, you know. But um, anyhow, I think that you have to accept the reality that in the in this life, in this time that is clown world, um, you can't make assumptions based on uh, the thinking that you held before clown world, before COVID, and so forth. Exterminator Bear says, "Are all those countries loyal to Global Homo and Clown World?" No, not all the countries are, and certainly in most cases, very few, if any, of the people are. But all of the people in government and, or I should say, most of the people in government and a lot of the people in the government bureaucracies are. You know, I mean, in the old days, this was called corruption. And the thing that I thought was interesting is that when Lawrence Tribe, who's a left-wing Jewish professor at Harvard, instinctively recognized that this was that the attacks were the result of corruption in the Netanyahu government. he wasn't laughed at. He was immediately hounded. And the thing is, the excuse they gave to say that he was wrong is just absolutely hilarious. I have to read it out loud just because I thought it was so funny. A Harvard professor has been forced to apologize for implying the Hamas attack on Israel was an attempt to distract from Benjamin Netanyahu's own corruption. Those who saw it were outraged, calling the professor an idiot who needs to go commit himself somewhere. Liberal political commentator Keith Olbermann also criticized Tribe's claims, calling it moronic and indefensible. Okay. Keith Olbermann doesn't know the first damn thing about international geopolitics, military history, or anything else. I mean, the fact that they had to go to Keith Olbermann to find somebody to denounce Tribe. I mean, you know, if I were to hear them quote someone like Martin Van Creveld saying, you know, that's absurd, it's not possible, nobody dislikes the Netanyahu government more than me, but it's just simply not possible, I would at least be willing to consider it. But Keith Olbermann doesn't even talk intelligently about Major League Baseball or the National Football League, and all he is and ever was is a sports commentator, a sports anchor. You know, I mean, I used to like Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann when they were on ESPN. But, you know, Olbermann thought that getting a clever reputation as a sports commentator meant that he was qualified to talk about politics. And, you know, he proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that he was in completely over his head. So, but the fact that just the suggestion, and notice that what Tribe was suggesting isn't what I'm talking about. What I'm suggesting the likely scenario is that the attack is itself corruption. Corruption of the government, corruption of its intelligence services, allowed these things to happen in order to achieve their goals. You know, it's like asking OJ about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Yeah, he's probably got a lot meaningful to say. And so, you know, this is still dangerous. It's still a very dangerous situation, even if it is a permitted provocation being used in order to justify ethnic cleansing, or even to justify a higher level of intervention in Gaza and the West Bank. So, because we don't know what the result is going to be, we don't know how it's going to go, and neither do the people who are making the plans. So, anyhow, I think that it's important to keep a very skeptical eye on how the situation is portrayed in the news media, both in the U.S., Israel, and around the world. And, you know, the more that happens, the more data we'll have, and the more it's going to become clear as to why it happened. So, but in any event, you know, deliberate ignorance flag, blind eye flag, we'll figure something out. But the main thing is to just understand that, as always, the only thing that we know didn't happen or isn't true is what the mainstream media has declared is the official story. So, let's wait and see. And, obviously, I'm sure we all hope for peace in the region. I've got friends and contacts and acquaintances over there, and I hope they're all well. Fortunately, I was able to, talk to some of them today, and I'm glad they're doing fine. And, but, we know from the COVID situation that the idea that a state government's primary objective is to protect the people of the state is just not the case. We absolutely know that's not the case. So every analysis we do, every observation we make has to keep that into account. On a more pleasant subject, some people asked me, they said, well, you showed us the junior classics, their spines. We know they're getting published here. And so they said, well, you showed number 8, you showed the spine of number 8. Where's the cover? Because I already showed number 7, the animal book. Yes, there actually is a story about otters in there. Shamelessly abusing my position as lead editor. And one thing I'm really happy about and very pleased about is that we have a beautiful modern classic story that we put in there, thanks to permission from the great John C. Wright. And so I think that the 2020 Junior Classics Animal book is going to compare very, very favorably to the 1958 edition that previously was the best edition. Something about those colors makes that look infographic to me. Well, first of all, these are, facsimile. These are not the actual covers. It's just but the colors imitate are a reflection of the colors that were used in the original Junior Classics, the 1958 edition. And then, so here is book 8, Heroes of History. And we have the Minuteman on the cover. There's a story about Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys. And, of course, that would be Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon. And, I actually in most cases, I like our covers a lot better than the old ones. I did really like the Joan of Arc on the cover that they used for the 1958 edition, so much so that we decided not to replicate it because, I just thought, let's do something new, let's do something different. We have a comment from a backer here. 1 through 6 were tremendous quality inside and out. My son devoured them, and I've explained the importance of them in more ways than one. Well, the great thing about these books, and if you've got kids, you absolutely should go, go to the trouble of picking up a set. If you can't afford these new ones, the 1958 editions, you can probably get a set for $50. But the new editions are very pro-American. The stories, we selected them, they're pro-American, they're pro-classics, they're pro-Christian. And they will have a lasting impact on the intellectual development of your children that will last their entire lives. And I can say that with absolute authority because they had that effect on me. When people say, well, what did you read that you think was important to you? What do you think, helped you develop intellectually the way that you did? And honestly, I can point to precisely two sets of books that I think are the most important thing. Number one, the junior classics, and as I've said, the 2020 junior classics, the Castelli junior classics, are the best junior classics. It's not even close at this point. How much is a set? Well, there's 10 of them, and they run like, we have to bump the prices up a little bit because Amazon changed its permissible minimum discount. But I think you can pick up a set for about $350. You don't have to buy them as a set. You know, you can buy them direct from the Archaven store one at a time. You can, buy them all. You can even buy them. Well, I think we're going to have a few leather copies left. So people with more expansive budgets can even get them in leather. You can see them above my head next to the three books of my Arts of Dark and Light above me there. Sheriff Runningham says the new editions are a good deal. I think they are because, I'm not saying that $350 is nothing, but they are very, very cheap at the price for what they will give your kids for years and years and years to come. I raised my kids on the junior classics. They all read all those books repeatedly. And the thing is, you come out of it, like people would ask me, well, how do you know about Socrates? How do you know about Caesar? How do you know about King Olaf of Sweden? And I didn't even know. I just did. And I just kind of, when I was younger, I just kind of blindly credited my parents for it. Even though, I don't think either one of them was anywhere near as conversant with that stuff as I was at 10 years old. But ultimately it was them. It was my parents because they put that stuff in front of me. And being a inveterate reader, I didn't just read them once. I didn't just read them twice. I even read them all again before we did the crowdfunding campaign. Just instinctive. I thought I should check them out, and then you read one story, then you read another story, and next thing you know, you're on like page 300 going, oh, I might as well finish it. And even if you don't have kids, if you've got nieces and nephews, if you've got friends then that have kids, I mean, what a great gift for them. And because we've actively curated the stuff, well, originally, just so you know, all we actually planned to do was to reprint the 1918 edition. That was the original plan. We're just going to they're public domain, bring them back to print. But then we started looking at them, and then we realized that there's a big difference between the 1958 version that I remembered, 1958 edition that I remember, that I read, and the original 1918. Already by 1958, some of the convergence was beginning to appear. It wasn't so much convergence at the time. I mean, it was convergence, but it was a negative convergence. What they did was they deleted the Americana. They deleted the Christianity that was in the 1918 edition. And so we thought, okay, well, we'll do the 1918 edition. We'll bring it back. But then there were some elements of the 1958 version where you're like, okay, actually this wasn't convergence. This is just these are better stories. So what we ended up with is about, I'd say, maybe 50% the 1918 edition, about 30% the 1958 edition, and then another 20% brand new stuff that we've hunted down and that we brought in. You know, and not just new stories, but other old stories, sometimes by similar authors or the same authors that contributed other stories. But you know, we found these other historical stories about, you know, if somebody wrote about Daniel Boone, they probably also wrote stories about Kit Carson and Davy Crockett, for example. So, you know, maybe we go with that instead. So, anyhow, I'm really pleased with how they've turned out. I understand that people are a little frustrated that it's taken us so long, but that's how it is. I mean, if you want quality, excuse me, if you want quality, it's going to take a while. It's going to take time. And I don't think anyone is going to regret what the final product is when we finally get 9 and 10 done and out to everybody. The good news is that, you know, 7 and 8 are done. 7 and 8 are, you know, going to be getting, I mean, they're already laid out. You know, we just published Chuck Dixon's Conan #2. Next week we publish The Altar of Hate. By the way, this is kind of funny. We decided to go ahead and produce some images, illustrations. We did some experiments. So this is a character. We've actually added a new book, or sorry, a new story to Altar of Hate. I put up an excerpt on the blog. It's called Shinjuku Satan. And what was kind of funny was I had just been mucking about with the AI stuff. And, you know, so I came up with this picture representing a character in a scene. And so this was a you know, decent character. Now, of course, you can't put that in a book, right? But our Marku pointed out, well, hey, you know, we can just use different styles. And so for those of you who have read some of the stories from the ebook Altar of Hate, you might be able to guess. I'll be very surprised, but you might be able to guess which story this is from. And we haven't done all of them yet. We're in the process because we're not doing it until next week. But oops, there are no audio files. I don't want an audio file. So if you happen to have read the ebook of Altar of Hate, which has been out for years, feel free to try to guess which story this is from. So, you know, and it's really nice that we're able to you know, produce illustrations even for the shall we say books for which we have lower expectations and we can't afford to hire the kind of illustrators that we do for, say, Chuck Dixon's Conan. So anyhow, this is a story that's set in India. I think that people will enjoy it. And then this is the Hamas Adventures in Israel. No. And this is the one that I think this is the one we'll probably settle on for the for the Shinjuku Satan story. So, anyhow, we're just actively working. Even if we're just doing a simple paperback or collection of short stories or something like that, what we're working very hard at is, providing the highest level of quality that we possibly can. There's it's become clear that with Amazon destroying the ebook market with Kindle Unlimited, and I've written a post about that today if you're curious about that. My estimate is that Kindle Unlimited has destroyed approximately $330 million worth of sales of ebooks every single month. I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds a lot, but if you talk to any independent author selling on Amazon, any publisher, they've all seen the same thing. Everybody's revenues have gone down considerably. And so, that's why we're very fortunate to have moved on to doing other forms, the print stuff, the leather stuff, etc. And we're also very, very appreciative of the way that our readers have supported us throughout, from ebooks to doing hardcovers and paperbacks to doing leather editions. It's really great. And that's why we're still around, whereas a lot of other companies just simply haven't. Powers That Bear says, think Spotify had a similar result. Absolutely. That's why bands are so focused now on touring revenues and stuff, because it's to the point now where you can't really make money from just recording. You have to go out and tour and have people pay to see you in concert. And that's also why concert ticket prices are so expensive, because that's where the musicians and the producers and so forth are making their money, not from getting their songs played on the radio or Spotify or whatever else. Wilson Bear, are there stories warning children about modern dangers? No. These stories that we're publishing are mostly classics, hence the term junior classics. I'm assuming you're talking about the junior classics. If you're talking about The Altar of Hate, that is absolutely not a book for children. Although I would think it was pretty obvious from the story titles. So, there's room for that type of stuff, but let's face it, the classics are classics for a reason. I'm sure there were plenty of stories warning about everything from the dangers of smoking to the dangers of autoeroticism, but they didn't survive because they're not classics. Wilson says, I meant in general. I have no idea. I don't pay very much attention to most modern publishing other than our own stuff. I just don't have the time, the interest, or the bandwidth to do so. The only reason that we were paying any attention to Bane was because, John and I were trying to figure out why on earth, the Bane ankle biters were so discombobulated and perturbed. It was very clear. Whatever was upsetting them didn't really have anything to do with John. Definitely didn't have anything to do with me, But when people are in a bad mood, they lash out, When people are upset, they lash out. We have I need to go back and address Wilson Bear's super chat. Sorry about that. Any chance the Palestinians get their land back? Yes, but probably only in a, I would say, 100-year time frame. You know, the world is changing. The and it's changing based on demographics. There was a very angsty report written by some American liberal organ, might have been even the New York Times, and they were talking about how conservative Christians have something like, uh, for every 100 conservative Christians, they have like, I don't know, it's like 180 children, and or I can't remember what the two groups were, but it was basically the more conservative, more Christian group was having nearly twice as many children as the other group. And the other group wasn't just pure atheists or pure, I think it was just like Democrats. And it was very, very clear that the future belongs to those who have kids. And so uh, the secular Israelis that currently run Israel um, are going to get replaced. They're going to get replaced by the Orthodox and the religious, and um, I don't think that those people are capable of actually running a state. You we'll see. You never know, but in the long term, I wouldn't bet on it.